Hogstye.
Hey everybody, and it is the post-draft episode of The Hogside. Alex here with you, and I got Steve on the show. No Jamal today because we're recording Sunday, so I think it threw everyone's schedules off a little. Let me start off though, because we have to start off with our partner and our sponsor, Symbol. Hey guys, we've told you about it. We've had this partnership with Symbol, the stock market for sports. You buy and trade sports teams and earn cash when they win. Symbol has been a blend of the stock market and sports. I'm using it. I'm enjoying it. Steve's using it. He's making a bunch of money because he picked a bunch of baseball teams, and I was stupid and I picked a bunch of football teams. So he's making money. I'm not making money yet.
I told you not to. You should have listened to me.
Yeah, I should have listened to you. But
the world in general should listen to me.
Yes, the world should listen to all of us on this show more. That would help our ratings,
but
and we'd get
especially
more
me.
advertisers. So, anyway, I bought the Washington football team. I did buy the Nationals, so I have made some money off the Nationals. If you're a homer like me, that's what you do. If you're smart like Steve and you buy teams that are going to be buy low, make money, sell high, that's another option. It's www.simbull.app, Symbol. Use our promo code HOGSTY, $10 deposit bonus. So again, visit symbol.app and /the HOGSTY. You can get that bonus right away, or you just click on them on our website. You know, very easy. Very simple way to get there. Start betting, make some money. Yesterday was a big betting day for a lot of people, Steve, because it was also the Kentucky Derby.
It was. It's the first year I've missed the Derby in forever since I was focused on the draft.
Yeah. I don't remember the Derby and the draft falling on the same day very often.
No, me neither. I don't either.
Yeah, but
because I'm a big Derby fan.
I did not know that. I did not peg you for a Derby guy.
I love horse racing.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
I've only ever
to the point where I can usually pick the winner.
I'm
pretty good at it, and I study the horses and everything. I just didn't this year because I was so focused on the draft.
Sure. Do you ever go to a track or been to any of the famous ones?
Well, I'm not a big bettor, as you know.
No, but if you like horse racing, go to the tracks at experience.
Yeah, I have been to horse racing tracks. I've never been to Churchill Downs, although I have been in Louisville. But right. I do enjoy going to horse racing. But I'm the type that I'll bet like $1 just to have something, but I don't bet big on anything. That's just not me.
When I was 18, my uncle took me and my younger cousin, who was like 12, and his friends. We all went to the track together. So, and I bet like $50 through the course of the day. This was at Saratoga, which is a beautiful, historic horse track.
Yeah.
Kind of like Churchill Downs. So, my job was basically to make bets for the little kids. You know.
Well, that's the home of the Belmont, is it not? Saratoga.
No. Belmont is down closer to New York City.
Okay.
Yeah. Saratoga used to be. It was one of the original Triple Crown tracks.
Well, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. I knew it was involved in the Triple Crown.
It was once, not anymore.
It's to the point where a lot of times will study the parentage of these horses, and I can figure out if you combine trainer, jockey, and heritage of the horse, I can usually get pretty close to determine who's going to win.
So you got a little Rick Snyder in you then, because I know he's a big guy like that too. Well, it was an interesting day for sports yesterday with that and with the third day of the draft, which is what we're really going to talk about, folks. We're not going to talk about horse racing.
We could go on and on about horse racing.
Well, I
talk
can.
about Secretariat?
Not much. I've only been to two races, so. But let's. We were talking about the Kentucky Derby. Why don't we start with our first player, Steve? Because he's from Kentucky.
Good transition.
Washington's first pick 19. It looked like for a second maybe a quarterback was going to fall to him, but nope, none of the quarterbacks fell. Which, thank goodness, I did not want Mac Jones.
I think Mac Jones is going to be a great quarterback. I think he might be the best out of all those guys, but Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I'm not high on Mac Jones.
I think you're drastically overvaluing athleticism and undervaluing the ability to throw from the pocket, which is what Mac Jones can do. And he's going to the best coach.
I will say that. He is going to the best coach. I'm undervaluing guys who look like they have my body type and playing quarterback.
Hey, Tom Brady is a taller version of you.
Tom Brady's pretty damn skinny though.
Kirk Cousins is a taller version of you.
Yes, I'm talking the gut thing, man. That's all.
Yeah, I know. I don't really care about
Yeah,
that.
I know.
I think he's going to be you can't teach some of what he can do, I think.
Well, we'll see on that. He's in a good situation, like you said. But let's talk about who Washington picks. Bit of a surprise in my book.
Me too.
We got to 19. I saw Darisaw was still on the board. I assumed they were going to go with Darisaw. Probably a good. He would have been a starting left tackle. But they go for Jamin Davis, linebacker out of Kentucky, who, we've all read up on him now, I think. We've all heard how Ron Rivera loves his character. He's really a physically impressive-looking dude when you see all the pictures of him, like his workouts and stuff like that. And apparently that's what moved him from... He was projected to be like a third-round pick early on.
I thought he was going to go top of round 2.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's where a lot of sites had him, was second, third-round range. But he apparently had a great pro day, that kind of, build up to the draft, and Washington takes him.
Well, also, don't forget he's a military kid, like me, and Ron Rivera, and like Ron Rivera, and Rivera likes that. So I think Davis is a high character guy. I was able to watch some of his film between yesterday and Thursday, and so here's what I saw. Well, let me back up. First of all, he's uber athletic, okay?
Definitely.
He's
got a 20-pack. He doesn't even have a 6-pack. He's got like a 20-pack.
He's got a whole bunch of packs, yeah. He was timed at 4.41 and 4.37 in the 40. Now, you got to assume those are inflated a little bit because they're unofficial pro day times. So give him mid 4.5s. That's blazing fast for a linebacker.
Right.
42 inches in vertical leap. They're NBA guards who have those kind of vertical leap numbers. So 11 feet in broad jump. Those are off the charts. So he's uber athletic. But when I watched this film, when I originally saw this, I immediately thought this guy's a weak side linebacker. Absolutely weak side linebacker. That was my immediate thought when they drafted him. Then I watched him. I think he's good enough to do anything. Mm-hmm. And I think Rivera actually, what I wrote in the write-up on the website, I think is not being fair to him because I said weak side linebacker immediately. But I actually think Ron may put him in the middle. Because, yes, he's fast. Yes, he can cover. He drops back a lot in coverage in Kentucky.
Right.
But he's kind of the commander of that defense. And he does play in the box sometimes. I think Rivera will see him as so talented that he's got to be in the middle. Mm-hmm. So it may not happen immediately, maybe not from day one, but I actually think he's going to be Washington's middle linebacker.
So I do too, and I agree with you. He can probably play all three spots just as easily. Yes. And let's be clear, middle linebacker is only really a position in the base 4-3. When you go to that nickel spot, you're really just weak side, strong side anyway.
Well, which, by the way, Kentucky almost never had more than 2 linebackers on the field.
I mean, that's the modern game now. The modern game is really you have 2 linebackers and you're using either a corner or safety,
I wouldn't go that far, but...
Most teams are nickel more often than not. That's my point. So... but I think he is going to be the middle linebacker, which is interesting because Washington, I've said this many times on the show over the years, we've never once drafted a middle linebacker in round 1. In almost 90 years, that's just never been hit.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah, which is weird because you think it's such an important position, and they've had some great ones, but they always come in as free agents. Fletcher, Sam Huff.
I think this year they may put him on the weak side because there's no other option. Mm-hmm. But I'm just talking ultimately.
Transition him.
I think he's going to be the middle linebacker. Yeah, like this year, you can't put Cole Holcomb on the weak side. I think he's terrible in coverage.
No, Holcomb's a strong side guy.
John Bostic is the same exact thing. So if you don't have Davis on the weak side, I don't know who you have.
Well,
that's the problem.
It also makes sense maybe to keep Bostic at MLB this year just because he knows the playbook better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give this kid a year to learn everything, then you can probably transition him in and flip him in Bostic at some point.
Yeah. And in terms of draft, status, because yes, I think most people thought of Davis as supposedly as a guy who should have gone a little lower.
Right.
But I think, Alex, you know how I've always felt about this. I think it's dumb to listen to the Mel Kipers and Todd McShays of the world too much.
Right.
The point is, if this guy works out, nobody's going to care where he was drafted. And nobody should care where he's drafted.
Or where he was projected, especially.
Rivera. Yeah, I mean, if you guys think that any NFL coach has spent 1 second listening to Todd McShay or anybody, you're totally wrong. They utterly don't care. And they should not care. And so this is where Jamin Davis was ranked.
Right.
By Washington. And so that's where they drafted it. And I'm totally fine with that. And by the way, just like my overall thoughts, we didn't really go into overall thoughts. Here's my overall thoughts on Washington's draft. This is a very need-based draft, which I applaud. As you know, Alex, I mean, I'm all for need-based draft. I think that's a smart way to draft. I think these fans who constantly chirp about BPA don't really know what they're talking about. And most teams don't do that. There's only a handful of teams that actually do that. But this is a case where Rivera was very careful to fill the gaps in his roster while drafting players that were more or less appropriate for the spot where they drafted.
Right.
And so I thought this is actually one of my favorite Washington drafts in a long time. I think this is an outstanding draft.
This is not a sexy draft. That's what I think a lot of people will hate.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of, face of the franchise looking guys in here right now.
True.
So I think people dislike that. I tend to be more of a BPA guy, you know that. But when you're drafted 19, there ain't no BPA. There's no, you look at the guys who are still there, no one stands out head and shoulders as, we should have taken him over Davis. Everyone was saying, why didn't they draft JOK? He lasted way later into the second round than everyone thought. Yeah.
And I, about him, I mean, I think he's a tweener.
Yeah.
I really think he's a tweener, and that's not really what Rivera wanted.
No.
I think Davis fits the bill much better than JOK
right.
did.
So I would say the only other guys there who, reputation-wise, maybe people were hoping for, Darisol, like I mentioned, JOK, and I know people started getting really hyped about the safety from TCU, Mooring, whatever his name is.
Mooring, yeah.
Who, as I said when I looked at the safeties, he just doesn't fit what they need. I don't understand why people are obsessed with getting another strong safety. But we'll get to that because they did draft a strong safety at one point.
Yeah, eventually. Overall, I hate draft grades too because it's dumb. But my instant grade would be A+. I think this is the best draft they've had since we started this show. Actually,
I don't know if I'd go that far. I'm not unhappy with it. I'm probably in the B+ range just because it's a wait and see with all these.
Well, the drafts are always wait and see.
Here's what I'm happy
Everybody's
about.
a wait and see.
When we go through this, we're, like you said, we're filling a lot of the holes that were still in the roster. So let's. I don't know if you have anything else you want to say about Davis.
No, on film, my initial reaction was immediately weak side linebacker. But after watching him play in the box, in coverage, and be sort of, the commander of that defense in Kentucky, I think his destiny is eventually.
He'll be great for tight end coverage, that's for sure.
Yeah,
mean, he and you cannot like how Holcomb covers, but that's two fast linebackers we got now, because Holcomb's pretty darn quick when you watch him play.
Yeah, he's not much in coverage, but
No. I think we're gonna see a lot of improvements in terms of linebacker speed. All right, let's talk about the next guy they picked. I didn't have this guy on my radar at all. Sam Cosmi, the offensive tackle out of Texas. Here's the thing.
You know who he reminds me of?
I'll tell you who he reminds me of, and then you tell me. I think he reminds me a little of Trent Williams.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. Minus the weed habit, hopefully. Yeah. But, he reminds me of Trent
Maybe
Williams.
he takes a few less blows to the head from champagne bottles, hopefully.
Oh, yeah, true.
But, yeah, okay, he's not as strong, and he's probably not as fast, because Trent was ridiculously fast for a lineman.
Well, that's why Trent was number 5 overall or 6 or whatever it was, and Cosmi's the second.
But Cosmi's probably, I don't know what his actual 40 time is. You might have it written down, but
at 4.8.
4.8. I was going to say he's probably in the 4.7, 4.8 range, which is pretty darn good. And
that's blazing fast when you're 6'6".
When you watch some of those
pounds.
highlights of his, he gets up in space quickly, and he gets that second tier very quickly. Now, what Trent had was he would get to the second tier quickly, to the third tier quickly, and he would be running down the sideline with Clinton Portis or whoever behind him. Oh, no, I guess it wasn't Portis. It was Almo by then, But he was going the same speed as the running backs down the field. Cosme might not,
and that's not Cosme.
No, he's not going to get there, but
but he's still a because my original thought about Trent Williams was this guy's his own scheme blocker, which kind of fit with what Mike Shanahan wanted. Mike Shanahan's the one who drafted him,
right?
And Cosme's sort of the same. I mean, a lot of people think Cosme's best fit as a zone scheme, which isn't really what Ron Rivera runs for the most part, but. I think this is about as well as they could do in round 2 because there was a run on tackles early in round 2.
There was,
and they kind of trickled down to Cosme, but I think he's a pretty good a tackle. He's played it both on the right side and the left side, so he's experienced it both. Washington obviously has Morgan Moses on the right side.
But Moses is 30 in his last year of his contract. Let's not forget.
Yeah, and he's been injured a lot, too,
yeah.
Here and there. So I think Cosme's a good fill. I mean, long-term, we don't know anything really about Sadiq Charles. I know Robbie Duncan came on the show and sung his Sadiq Charles praises a year ago. You know? So I think I'll have to compete with Charles ultimately, but they definitely needed a tackle, obviously, and Cosme was the best one they could get at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not mad about that pick at all, and he's probably going to need a year to develop. Which I think is fine because we have Lucas at least not perfect, but you could start with him and transition to Cosme over a season,
Yeah, I haven't got around to watching his film yet.
No, I've only watched a little bit.
To
obviously, you see the highlights when he was picked, but
I don't really like highlights. I try not to watch highlights because I just think they're not all that useful for me.
No, they're not perfect.
But I'll get around to Cosme eventually.
Like I said, you can see the mobility in some of those. You can see he probably is raw, probably needs a lot more technique work.
Well, you know what? He's very experienced, though.
Yeah.
He's played 30. He started 34 games in college.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and so I think I like the pick a lot.
Worst case, he's your third tackle for 4 or 5 years.
And of course, that wouldn't be good for a second-round pick. So I mean, you draft a second-round pick to be a starter. So I hope he does better than that.
I'd hope so, but I'm saying that's a worst-case scenario. And you need 7 good linemen to play in the NFL now.
I'd call him a bust if he's not
starting.
That's his destiny.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd call him a bust.
All right, let's move on to this. Was a head scratcher to me. This was probably the first head scratcher. Benjamin St. Juste, Canadian cornerback from Minnesota. French speaking, learned English at 17. I think they said when he was drafted. Interesting person, but a giant for a corner, 6'3". So, I mean, maybe you get this guy in and you're just using him to match up in the red zone and, kind of role-playing him. I don't know.
I didn't understand this pick at all. This is a pick where, again, I'm all about drafting for need, but there were a lot of other corners, and I think you could have got this guy significantly lower in another round, probably. I wrote our corner preview. I wrote up 10 corners and didn't even write
this guy wasn't even on your radar.
No, not really. I mean, I knew the name, and that was about
it.
I kind of wondered when I originally saw this, particularly when people were calling him a DB, I kind of wondered if maybe Washington sees him as a safety. Because I don't know why. I mean, they have 2 starting corners already, and you're not going to be a slot corner at 6'3".
No.
He's a boundary corner. So I sort of wonder what they were doing with this pick, and it really did make me wonder if they see him ultimately as a free safety.
I just, what I've watched of him, he looks very lengthy when he moves. I don't know if he's got the swivel to play safety.
Well, it's not surprising when you're 6'3" and 200 pounds. They're pretty thin.
Right. But, when you think safety, a safety's got to be able to shift, from sideline to sideline pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Which a 6'3" guy can't
I'm just
do.
grasping at straws here.
Yeah.
That kind of made me wonder. I mean, he's not blazing fast. He had 4.51 40. So again, that's unofficial pro day time. Right. So if you round up to 4.55, he's not that fast.
No, he's not.
Not that athletic. 34-inch vertical leap.
He doesn't. If he's a safety, he's not a cover safety, like a cover 1 type.
Yeah, I just don't. I didn't. I haven't watched his film, so I don't want to speak too much about him. But I didn't really understand this pick.
Well, like I said, what I see is if you're getting a guy this big, you're gonna try and match him up on tight ends and big receivers. Do that kind of thing with him.
But this is another guy who fits a mold for Ron Rivera. He's smart.
Right.
Graduated from Michigan in 2 years.
Right.
Was at Minnesota as a grad student. So I think Rivera likes guys who are smart. And that's another theme through this draft. He drafted a bunch of guys who are smart.
Right.
He didn't draft morons.
There's a good argument there for that. That's the reason maybe he went for this guy over some other needs that they had.
Yeah, and I just think ultimately, or even other corners, because there were a bunch of other corners available. That it wasn't so much that I was surprised he drafted a corner. It was that I was surprised he drafted this guy in particular in round 3, because he just was on nobody's radar at all. And who are we to question Ron Rivera's ranking?
Right.
I mean, he knows 80 times more about football than we ever will.
He has two GMs who have like 50 years experience, like.
Yeah, I mean, I think I trust Martin Mayhew way more than Marty Herney, to be perfectly honest. But I mean, regardless, yeah, there's a ton of expertise, and we're just two idiots on the radio here. So who knows?
Sure. I think that's true.
I just kind of wonder if they're going to use him as a safety, just because I don't really see how he fits in with what Washington has otherwise.
I'm with you. It's a weird, I just don't see his body type fitting that role very well.
Well, particularly since it was so clearly obvious that they drafted for need in almost every other pick, and you throw this kind of random corner in, and who wasn't on anybody's radar, and even if they just loved his film,
right?
Do you really need a highly drafted boundary corner?
No,
not really. Because they have two guys on big contracts.
Right. Yeah. All right, let's talk about. They went back to need on that second pick at pick 82. All right, you have to help me. Diami Brown, wide receiver out of North Carolina. He fits in something that this team has needed for a while. He's a plays on the edge, downfield threat. When he gets the ball in his hands, he makes big plays. He's that kind of guy, which goes well with the fact that the free agents they've pulled in. Very good in the slot. I mean, they have speed. They can play on the edge, but this guy is truly more of an edge receiver.
I mean, not truly more. That's all he did. I did watch his film.
Yeah, I watched a lot of highlights and stuff like that on YouTube after we picked him.
I watched some real film about him last night. I stayed up and watched Diami Brown film, and he was always on the left outside position. That is where he always played. He didn't play in the slot at all.
He can go inside. He runs a nice slant route, I noticed.
Yeah, but he doesn't. He just wasn't. He has zero experience in the slot at all. I think he's pretty limited to vertical routes. Doesn't mean he can't develop and learn and grow, but I think right now here's the problem. I liked him, by the way. I thought it was a pretty good pick, but here's the problem. When he was at North Carolina, he's the vertical guy running deep routes. A lot of times he was blown by corners.
Right.
But that's at the college level. And, his 40 time isn't that great. I mean, it's good. He's 4.4. He ran a 4.44 40 at the pro day. Now, again, you bump that up a little bit. He's getting close to 4.5. Not to say he's slow, but I think the damage he did as a vertical threat at North Carolina isn't going to translate quite as well to Washington simply because by NFL standards he's not a blazing fast receiver.
No, he's average speed.
So
by NFL standards.
Yeah, and so his talents as a strictly vertical guy, I'm not sure going to blend nearly as well as they did in college. That's my problem because I don't think he's he runs good routes for what he runs, but I think he's pretty limited right now in terms of the route tree, just by experience. Again, that's not to say he can't learn and develop, but if you kind of assume he's sort of a Z receiver,
right?
Because that's usually what he was playing. His brother, by the way, was on the right side, usually the X. I can't remember his brother's first name.
That's interesting.
It starts with a K. It's his younger brother. And so it was Brown and Brown. So I think he's kind of a Z guy who's running deep routes, and I don't know if his destiny is as a starter here in Washington.
Well, one of the write-ups I read said he's probably a career number 2 guy or number 3 guy, which, in the third round, that's not unexpected.
You'd hope for a starter, but
yeah, you hope that he can be more, but, that's not a weird thing for a wide receiver in that round to be, kind of your second look.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I think he's a receiver who maybe more than others is going to take some time to grow into an NFL receiver.
I think so too. That's probably why he didn't go in the first round. And I did see somebody say, this is probably Washington's best steal because, deep receiving class. In other years, this guy might be a first or second rounder just because he is that deep threat. And, that's coveted. Yeah,
I think it was a good pick. I do like
him. I think it's an okay pick. I'm not complaining about it.
Round 3, I just sort of question whether he's ultimately going to be starter material unless he grows and develops quite a bit from what he is now.
Well, I think here's why I like it, though. It does fill the big need they had at receiver, which is they needed more downfield threats. We got Samuel, who as good as he could be, he's not that his game isn't necessarily doing that.
Mark Bullock called Samuel on this show the gadget guy.
Right. So his game is not necessarily doing the, fly route.
Now, in terms of Brown, I don't think he's an expert at tracking the ball in the air. I think he could get better at that. I don't think his hands are Jerry Rice level sure hands. He bobbled some balls here and there. The quarterback, by the way, was horrible. North Carolina's a terrible quarterback. It's horrible. They had, who's the guy last year? Was it Jones?
Yeah.
Daniel, not 2 years ago. They have had, but this quarterback's, can't throw a deep ball if there was a gun to his head. Just terrible. And so from that respect, he's not helping Brown at all. But even said, there were plays in which Brown didn't really play those balls
perfectly
in the best way he could. Sometimes he fought through corners, sometimes he didn't. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to really need some time, which is good because there's a lot of guys ahead of him. Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin are going to start, obviously. Right. Adam Humphries is probably the slot guy, so there's not really a need to have Brown start.
No,
and play a lot early, and that's a good
there's
thing.
Not. But my point is, he fits a role that this team needs, which is good.
Yes. They haven't had a deep threat since Deshaun Jackson.
No, not a legitimate one.
Right.
Terry can be a danger downfield, but that's not what you want him for.
Yeah, you'd be underusing him if you just did that.
Right. And that's fine. You need guys with roles in this receiving corps. So I'm not unhappy with that pick.
I'm not unhappy either. It's just I think there's weaknesses in this game, and I think that I did see some people say it was a huge steal and all that. I don't necessarily think it was a huge steal. I think he was drafted sort of right where he should be drafted in terms of back around 3. I don't think he would have been a very good round 2 pick.
It's a quite crowded receiving group though now.
Oh God! Yeah. What else is a super crowded room? I've updated my chart. It's not published on the website yet. It will be. The defensive line is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's getting pretty thick.
Yeah, defensive line and the receiver group are both just stupid crowded. Yeah. They really are. And like receiver-wise, let me do a quick count. 1, 2, 3,
I think we're at 10.
Oh, no, we're way more than 10. I believe that is 13.
Ooh, okay.
Here's the group in alphabetical order. Jeff Bidet, Diami Brown, Tony Brown, DeAndre Carter, Trevor Davis, Antonio Gandy Golden, Kelvin Harmon, Adam Humphries, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Cam Sims, Steven Sims, and Isaiah Wright. So even if you assume they keep 6, there's a lot of people that are going to
more than half are gone.
And Diami Brown is not going to get cut. So there's 4 locks.
Terry.
That would be
Terry's a lock.
Terry.
Yeah.
Samuel's a lock. I would think Humphreys is probably a lock, even though his contract isn't
See,
locked.
that's actually a good point. When we talk wide receivers later, I think that's a big discussion. Humphreys might not be a lock with how crowded that is.
Maybe not. Yeah, so maybe not. So Samuels, Brown, McLaurin are locks. But the rest of them, there's, 10 people fighting for 3 spots?
Yeah.
That's competitive.
Well, and it's all, at that point, it's can you play special teams? Can you carve out a niche for yourself? Like, you got 3 guys carving out that big possession receiver job, or fighting for that. AGG, Harmon.
I don't even know where any of them are going to get playing time either. Unless you throw Sims in the slot, which I've always said he could do, as you know. I don't know. Those big guys, where are they going to play? When are they going to play? You're not paying Curtis Samuel huge money to sit on the bench.
No, that's where it gets tricky. I'm assuming you use them in the red zone more, but that would mean somebody's got to go off, right? So,
I think one of those guys is not going to be here. That's why between Cam Sims, Calvin Harmon, Antonio Gandy Golden, I don't know how they keep all those 3 guys.
I wouldn't be shocked if only one of them's here.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
We'll get to that in another episode.
Yeah. We have position group breakdowns coming up.
Yeah. Well, that's the next thing we got to start doing. All right, let's talk the next guy, though. Round 4 pick, John Bates, Boise State tight end. I watched a little, YouTube of him. Big body, kind of limited as a receiver. It looks like he's basically just a run-up-the-seam guy, at least from what I saw. He's not a, go vertical, or he's not a crossing route tight end, or he's no Jordan Reed. He's not running a big route tree. But if the goal is we need somebody who can block, he looks like he's got the body for it. He might need to work on it because no college tight ends learn how to block anymore. But
Bates is your traditional Y tight end, meaning your inline tight end. He's not the F guy that Jordan Reed was. He's drafted in the round 4. He's not going to be Travis Kelce. I got to admit, this is another guy I kind of scratched my head at a little bit. Not that they drafted a tight end, but Bates is another guy who I think they could have gotten in a couple rounds lower. But if this is the guy Ron Rivera wanted, he fits the need that the Washington has to a T. This is your traditional inline blocking tight end. I think Alex is right. I don't think he's much of a pass threat, but they don't really need him to be a huge pass threat. What they need is an inline blocking tight end who can go catch some contested red zone balls.
Right.
And that's exactly what this guy is. And so I actually think, while, yes, they might have been able to get him in round 5, he fits what they need perfectly, and I think that's what Ron Rivera saw.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, he does a lot of catch at the high point. So like you said, in the red zone, that makes a lot of sense. He might be a guy who only catches 15 balls a year, but it very well could be that a handful of them are, red zone catches. So that's worthwhile.
Well, it's funny you say that because they only had 47 receptions in college.
Right. Well, because that's not his game.
It's not his thing. Yeah, for those of you out there who question that, just think about the role that they want him to play. This man is 6'5", 250 pounds. We've been crying and bleeding for an inline blocking tight end in this fan base for this team for years.
Probably since Logan Paulson left. He was the last good one.
And this is John Bates. This is who he is. I kind of wondered, I was sort of expecting Tony Poljan maybe to be drafted. So I was a bit surprised by Bates because Poljan's another guy, 6'7", huge guy, blocker. Right. But clearly they like Bates best. And so, again, who am I to argue with Ron Rivera about this? But I do think the draft value people, and that's a term that makes me want to claw my eyes out, draft value. But those guys would question this pick.
Well, those guys tend to also not like blocking tight ends. So, they're
it's like the Mil Kipers of the world who go, who have this line about, well, he's not good value, which again makes me want to claw my eyes out.
I'm with you.
To me, they like Bates. He was there. He fits exactly what the team needs him to do. They drafted him. And if he works out and he becomes like a major contributor someday, nobody's going to know or care that he was drafted in round 4 versus round 5.
Everyone after this point is kind of a crapshoot anyway, because that's just how the NFL is.
And I'll say this, he came from Boise State. Boise State is a quality program with quality coaches. They have a long-standing history of success. No, they're not Alabama, but Boise State has crushed their competition at their level, which is sort of a mid-major kind of level. They've crushed everybody. I mean, they got cheated by the BCS out of the national title game a couple years, several years ago.
I think we're actually over a decade since that happened now.
Yeah, I know, but they've been that good that long.
Oh, yeah.
And so Bates is coming from a program that has provided him good coaching and a good program.
The Mountain West or WAC or whatever, because I think they've had to change.
Well, it's been both.
Yeah, because it's merged now. But they were always kind of like the top of that list for the last 15 years. So it's a good program. I'm not going to knock that part of it at all. The blue turf thing, they got a culture there.
It's a bit hard to see, but yeah. And so if you look at, because if you look at Washington's tight end group, you don't have a guy like this. Logan Thomas is not a blocking tight end.
Reyes is a Logan Thomas clone.
Reyes is almost the Kyle Pitts clone, but bigger.
I mean, he's the athletic receiving guy.
Yeah, but we didn't even know if Reyes can play football.
We don't.
I think fans are overvaluing Reyes. Yes, he's exciting to have, but the man has never played a down of football in his life. So I hope he succeeds, but I mean, who knows?
Right.
And who else do they have? Marcus Baugh, Tamarick Hemingway. I mean, who are these guys?
Those guys are walk-on
Dylan Cantrell.
types,
Yeah, Tyrone Swoops. So they desperately needed tight end. I think was the second biggest need on the team behind linebacker.
Possibly.
If you ask me.
It was definitely up there. You could have debated that and left tackle maybe as second biggest.
Yeah, right. That'd be another one. But again, need pick. They like John Bates. It fits precisely what they needed.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a successful pick. Could they have got him in round 5? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I have no problem.
You know
with
what?
this
If
one.
it works out, who cares?
All right. Next up on the list, Derek Forrest, safety out of Cincinnati. This one, we needed a safety, but this is a head scratcher because Forrest is really a strong safety. He's kind of in the. He's not a box safety like Collins, but he's kind of that cover 2 strong safety, which we already have a very good one in Cam Curl. So,
yeah, I kind of think, first of all, there's not really a strong safety in cover 2. It's a split high zone scheme, and I agree with you. I don't think he's a true free cover 3, single high deep safety.
No, he's definitely
That's not what he is. I don't think. That having been said, he's another guy. He ran a blazing 40 time, 4.38, unofficial. So you bump him up to mid 4.4s. That's still blazing fast for a safety. But I was like, this is kind of head scratcher a little bit. I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about Derek Forrest, before the draft, but I don't know. It kind of makes me wonder what they were thinking.
I mean, it's a guy where, since I watch a lot of Temple football and they're in the same conference, I've obviously seen him play, but I don't really remember it. So, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I heard that this was kind of a special teams pick, that this was the guy that our special teams coach wanted.
I think this is definitely a special teams pick. I think you're totally right about that.
And we all know
and listen,
you need a good safety or two on special teams.
Yeah, I mean, you're not drafting a round 5 guy to march in and be your starting free safety. If he can do that, great.
No.
But that's not the expectation. Again, comes back to me wondering whether Benjamin St. Juste they really want him to be a safety, but we've already covered that.
That's going to take a year to make that happen.
Yeah, right. And so, it may be that DeShazier Everett gets the job by default for another year.
Well, he played okay until he got hurt. So.
Yeah, well, yeah. Forrest is another guy who's a pretty good athlete, though. I mean, he's got a 39-inch vertical leap. He put up 21 bench press reps, which for a safety is very good, especially when he's a lengthy guy, But, I think he's kind of a cover 2 guy at best. So I think that you're right, and I think he's a core special teamer.
Yeah.
And that's actually what I put in our write-up on the website, that he's a core special teamer.
I think we're in agreement there, that'll be his job. All right, speaking of core special teamers, Steve, we're to my favorite pick because people melted down.
Oh, did they?
On Twitter.
I'm so glad I didn't look at Twitter yesterday because Twitter is a wasteland, and I highly encourage everybody to resign from it. But go ahead.
Cameron Cheeseman, the long snapper out of Michigan, the one who I know you talked to a guy and he said the Alabama guys get it better, but I was like, well, we got to get the guy with the Cheeseman name because it's just funny.
So I talked to what Alex is referring to is 2 weeks ago. I talked to a guy named Chris Rubio, who's probably the top ranked the top ranked long snapping coach nationally. And it was kind of by accident, but I talked to him and I said, "Hey, give me your names for long snappers in the draft." And he immediately said John Fletcher, Alabama, number 1. He said George Langdon, Georgia Southern, number 2, and then Cheeseman, number 3. That was the order he said those names. I think you want to know what I think. I think that Washington traded for this pick because this pick was the trade with Philadelphia that got netted this pick.
What, next year's 5th for a 6th and a 7th this year, which is, by the way, good value in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that they got wind that Carolina was going to draft along, because don't forget, Carolina drafted Fletcher 3 picks before this. And so I think they got wind of that somehow, and they needed to make sure they could get a long snapper. But I think their intent was to draft Fletcher, and they just lost out on him.
Yeah, it might have been the case, but regardless, some people got very upset online because they drafted a long snapper at all.
What did you guys think they were going to do? Yeah. Were they going to sign me to be the long snapper?
That's my thing.
They had to have a long snapper, people. Use your heads.
You have to have one.
They had to have a long snapper. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay, maybe you wait until and get one as a undrafted free agent, but then it's a gamble. You don't know if they'll sign.
It is, yeah. And again, Carolina just drafted a long snapper 3 picks beforehand, so the top guy's gone. Right. Are you going to compete in free agency, in the undrafted free agent world for one? Are you going to secure what you desperately need by using one of the draft picks on him? I thought it was a perfect pick. I love this pick, and it makes me happy makes me happy that the fan base on Twitter is melting down. That means it's a good pick.
Yeah, and I for one love it because you needed one. If you want to talk about the ultimate draft for need, you needed a long snapper.
Yeah, people forget that they didn't have a long snapper. There weren't any great names in free agency, and they didn't sign one in free agency. So what did you guys think they were going to do? Seriously.
Right, exactly.
And listen, this guy's a 3-year starter. He's pretty big, first of all, for a long snapper, 6'4", 237 pounds. As you brought up when we talked about this a week ago, Alex, there's a punt coverage aspect to this, and he's a bigger dude. He was bigger than Fletcher. Fletcher isn't this big. So in that respect, he may be a little bit more of a net positive in the punt game than would be Fletcher.
Yeah, I didn't even consider that, but that's a good point. He could be that.
And I trust Chris Rubio, and Rubio liked him, and that's good enough for me. Because I'm not going to pretend to have watched a second of Cheeseman's film. No, I haven't.
Well,
but Rubio,
none of us could watch it and understand what's going on.
No, not at all. But this is a guy this long snapper guy I talked to vouched for.
Yeah. So I thought that was actually very funny that they actually drafted this guy because I'd been calling for it for a while.
I really think that they traded for that pick for the intent of drafting Fletcher.
They probably
didn't. They went to their number 2 guy on their board, which was Cheeseman over the other guy, Langdon.
They probably did. All right, 3 picks left, all in the 7th round. I don't think we'll spend too much time on them because they're 7th round picks. So why do you spend? It's not fair to. Let's talk William Bradley King, defensive end out of Baylor. I watched some tape of him, some YouTube, where they just cut up a couple of his games. I don't see it. I don't think this pick, I don't see much potential there. He's not that big. You said he's, 6'3", when we were talking before?
6'3", 252 pounds.
Right. But he looks very lean and lengthy when you watch him. He's not very fast. He doesn't get off his blocks very well from what I saw. I guess he might have potential, but I just don't see a whole lot there off the bat, at least not as end.
He's another guy. His 40 time, by the way, you said he went fast, 4.79 unofficial time at Baylor's pro day. So again, you have to bump that up a little bit. And so you got to figure he's probably a mid 4.8, which is not that fast for an edge rusher. I kind of wondered. My initial thought when I saw this pick was linebacker.
It could be. he to me, what he looks like when I was watching, and I was watching cut-ups of him playing against West Virginia. What he does, the one thing he does well, which is also kind of annoying, is he's very good at locking up a offensive lineman, and creating that gap for somebody else to make the play. But he doesn't make the plays much himself, from what I saw.
I mean, this guy reminds me a little bit of last year's 7th round pick was James Smith-Williams. And by this standard, Smith-Williams, another guy, very smart. Smith-Williams, the guy who had a job at IBM lined up if he didn't get drafted, remember? Well, Bradley King transferred to Baylor as a grad student. So he's working on a master's degree. He's another smart guy. No, physically, Alex is right. His physical profile, not that great. Not that athletic by NFL standards. 34-inch vertically, 9'11" in the standing broad jump. None of that stuff blows you away. And, I mean, is he an elite edge rusher? Absolutely not. No. I kind of wonder, if he's a linebacker. But I just think that Rivera likes these guys who are intelligent.
He does. Guys
who, can be a contributor, and that's all you need out of a 7th rounder. So, I mean, nobody expects him to be a starter.
No. Just come in relief from time to time for one of the stars. Next one up, the other defensive end they picked. This one made more sense to me, Shakatoni. I think he's got a lot more upside. Obviously 7th round pick, so he's not going to have elite measurables, but looks like he could be, decent vision, better at getting through blocks and getting to the ball carrier or the quarterback, whoever. To me, he would be the one that would be my, first guy going in on a relief role. He's not going to be a starter, obviously, but of these two, no. I like him more.
I think he lasted around 7 because he's a tweener. He's only 6'2", 242 pounds. He's got elite athletic measurables in some respects. He ran a 4.5 40, which by edge rusher standards is blazing fast. Right. I think his destiny is as a third down pass rushing specialist because he's way too small to ever be a starter. And he's a 7th round pick on a team with 4 first-round picks, so he's not going to be a starter. But, yeah, I think I'm with you. I think if you had to rank order these two, I'd rank Tony over Bradley King probably, certainly for what Washington needs. But I think he lasted so long because he's an edge rusher. It's too small to be an edge rusher in any sort of regular basis. So I think he's the guy when it's 3rd and 10 and it's going to be a pass and you need another edge rusher, you bring Tony in. That's what I think the Washington does.
And the height, you're probably not going to get taller, but you could probably bulk him up.
Yeah, I mean, no, he's not going to grow. He's not going to be 6'4". No. But you could. But the worry when you bulk people up is always what happens to his speed. And so if you slow the guy down,
right,
that's probably worse than having him 15 pounds
that's
heavier.
True. And the size you said he is 240, and with that speed, I could also see. Again, a key special teams role there, not, gunner or anything, but you put him on the line on a punt coverage, that's going to be an advantage with that speed.
And that's the only way he's going to make the roster is if he is a core special teamer. So I think that's exactly right. And so I think, to be honest, that's probably why they drafted him, would be my guess.
Yeah.
That sure, they want some, like you pointed out in your edge rushing draft review weeks and weeks ago, that they need a depth, and they don't need starters, they need depth. And this guy, and for that matter, Bradley King, is depth. But Tony strikes me as having the ultimate special teams coverage profile.
Yeah, he does.
Fast, 240 pounds, basically a linebacker size. He's a linebacker size. What he is.
I mean, you were saying maybe they want to move King to linebacker. Tony could also, with that size, you could easily see that too.
Yeah, exactly. And you never know what's going to happen with these guys. Yes, he was an edge rusher in college, at Penn State. Right. So what?
Right.
Who knows how he's going to develop.
Never forget Lorenzo Alexander, who played 12 positions, I think, before they finally moved him to linebacker for good.
Yeah, exactly right. I think both of these guys are going to have trouble making the roster.
Right. Well, I mean, it's a deep, deep spot, like you were saying before.
Yeah.
All right, last one up. Dax I almost said it wrong. It's Dax Mill, but he has an N-E on the end of his name, and you don't pronounce that.
He has an
So
innie?
Dax Mill.
I mean, he has a belly button that you can't see.
Yes.
He's
yeah,
an innie?
knee. Yeah. But BYU receiver, he was the go-to guy for Wilson.
Zach Wilson, quarterback who got drafted number 2 overall.
So, and I believe they were even college roommates. So, this is, an interesting pick. Kind of a similar playing style to Brown in that he's really an edge guy. You put him outside the numbers. You don't really see him in the slot a lot. Was playing on the left side a lot. He doesn't have breakaway speed. At least it didn't look like it from what I saw. A lot of his big plays are contested catches, things along those lines. So, good hands. We'll see where things go with him. 7th-round receivers tend not to be that long of a career in the NFL. So,
by the way, when I said 13 receivers, I had forgotten about
Mill.
Mill.
So we're at 14 now.
So he's actually number 4. I hadn't added him to my chart. I forgot him. So, so he's number 14. Mill's problem is that he's 6'1", 193 pounds, but he's also not that fast. He ran a mid 4.5 40, 4.54, 4.57 unofficial at BYU, which means he's a 4.6 guy realistically, but he's small, so you'd want a small guy to have speed, but he doesn't have that.
Right.
What he has, again, is brains. He's a good route runner. He's had success in college. But I don't think he's much of a special teamer. He doesn't have a history of punt return in BYU particularly. So I think he's another guy who's going to have a really, really tough time making the roster. I think you may see him on the practice squad or on the breadline.
Maybe. I mean,
September.
Like you said, we got 14 receivers now to deal with.
Yeah, and you can't save all those guys on the practice squad. You're only going to save a couple of them. So, I mean, I think he's a good pick he was the second to last pick in the entire draft. So nobody expects much from him in that regard. I like to take a shot on a guy like this. He had success in college, but his physical profile doesn't really excite me too much as a guy who can maybe make a long-term impact. He's going to get the obvious comparison to Trey Quinn, but it's an unfair comparison because they're both white, and that's what a lot of people are going to see, but he's not at all
Trey Quinn is a natural slot receiver. This guy's a natural outside.
And so I don't think just ignore race for a minute, people. Get it out of your head and look at what they do, and you're right. I mean, Trey Quinn is a slot guy. He's not a slot guy.
Trey Quinn is a punt returner. This guy's not a punt returner. Yeah. I'm with you. I wouldn't have made that comp at all, honestly. Just,
Well, you wouldn't because you're a reasonable person, but other people tend to look at race and see everything through the lens of race, and this is not the case.
There is also an unfair, or not unfair, but there does tend to be, white receivers tend to be slot guys. That does happen quite a bit.
We have one on our team in Adam Humphries.
Yeah. Well, we have two. Is Quinn still on the team? You listed 14 guys. Was he on there?
No, they cut
Quinn. They did cut Quinn finally. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we've had a lot of them too. That's what happens. All right, not drafted, but we've only had one real big undrafted free agent signed. Washington's apparently said they're not going to be active in the undrafted free agent market.
Well, and the reason for that is if you add Mill, when I told you off the air what the count was, I had forgotten about Mill. Right. So I have my chart that has hundreds of columns.
Right. It's hard. It's easy to get lost in those numbers.
Well, one of the things it does is automatically give me a roster count. And now we're at 90. With Mill, we're at 90.
So that's why we can't they didn't sign anybody, because we have everything filled.
But they did sign a guy who's a literal bowling ball.
Yes. I loved this signing. Jarrett Patterson, running back from Buffalo. He made a name for himself, I think it was 2 seasons ago, when he had a 400-yard, 8-touchdown game. Now, look, Buffalo is a MAC school. It's a small conference in terms of...
And it was against Kent State.
Yeah, this was against Kent State. The MAC conference is basically, here's teams, 100 through 120 range, and the top school in the MAC is usually in the 80s in terms of like power rankings. But that being said, this kid's impressive. When you watch his highlights, when you see what he did at Buffalo, because before that 400-yard game, he had a 300-yard game. So he's a guy who has big game potential. Let's put it that way.
You want to hear what this guy did against Kent State alone in college? Played Kent State 3 times. 737 yards and 10 touchdowns.
That's not bad.
That's just against one team. That's crazy. I think running back is one of the few positions that translates well from small school to NFL, because the skills are, you have to be able to read the field. You have to be able to make decisive cuts quickly, and you have to be a decisive runner. And I think this guy, Jarrett Patterson, by undrafted free agent standards, has all of that.
Yeah.
And like Buffalo listed him at 5'9", he measured out at under 5'7".
Really? I didn't know he was that small.
Yeah.
Honestly.
He came out like 5'6.5" or something.
Dude, that's tiny.
At 195 pounds, he's a stocky guy. So, no, did we draft O.J. Simpson? The next O.J. Simpson or the next,
Darren Sproles. I'm trying to think of little running backs now to comp them to.
Yeah. I mean, I always come back to O.J. for some reason.
You've got O.J. in the brain. It's because you love Sunkist. That's why.
Is O.J. a Sunkist guy?
No. Orange juice. O.J.
Orange juice, I guess.
O.J.'s
just a very talented running back. Yeah. His little murder problem aside. But point is, I mean, I don't know what to expect from Patterson, but I do know he can play football. And here's the other thing. When you're that short, I think he's got a huge advantage because you can't see this guy.
Right.
When you're running behind guys who are an entire foot taller than he is,
dope.
How are defensive guys gonna see him in the very little college film? I did watch a tiny bit of Jarrett Patterson film yesterday. I just ran out of time. But nobody gets a clean hit on him. Part of it is he's small. Part of it, he bounces off everybody like a bowling ball. And no, he's not going to be able to do that quite to the same extent against the Bears that he did against Kent State. But all the same, I think this guy is actually someone who can make the roster and have an impact.
I think he can too, because I think, we've talked about they need to upgrade that short yardage third running back spot. Now, 195, 5'6" is not ideal. You're really hoping for somebody almost, 50 pounds heavier. But, if a guy that size can maybe do it, and, you look at what they're doing with Cosme coming in, I wonder if they're trying, more zone running would make sense with the way the roster is being built. So maybe a little guy like this, they work well in that kind of system. Small guys work well in the zone game.
You want to know here? So, yeah, he had a 300-yard game against Bowling Green. Here are his numbers for Bowling Green in college. Played him 3 times. 687 yards, 12 touchdowns.
That's pretty good.
So for those of you keeping score, that is over 1,500 yards and 22 touchdowns against 2 teams.
Yeah.
In 6 games. That's production, man.
That's pretty good production.
I predict this. I think he's going to be a fan favorite.
Well, and he's like from here too. He apparently played high school football with Chase Young. We found they put that out there. So
I did not know. So yeah, if that's the case, he'll definitely.
Yeah, there's a very cute picture of him at like an NFL draft thing where he's like sticking his head in like the giant Redskins shoulders from back in the day.
Oh, so he's a lifelong Washington fan too.
Yeah, so he'll be a fan favorite pretty quick, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, they may round him up to 5'7", as they list him, but still, that's tiny.
No, he's a little dude.
But I like the guy. I like what he's done. Again, I think running backs translate well.
I do too.
And nobody's expecting him as an undrafted free agent to come in and grab the starting role.
No.
They kind of have, Washington sort of has a room full of misfits at running back a little bit. You know? I mean, all these guys, none of them are sort of traditional running backs. So he fits in well in that regard. You've got a wide receiver slasher at starter. Yeah. You've got a guy who's 5'6", coming in. They have a non-traditional take on running backs.
And then you got J.D. McKissick, who's really just a receiver, not.
Yeah, I couldn't. Right, the name was escaping me. He's the other one. Yeah, non-traditional.
No.
They don't have. I mean, like Najee Harris wouldn't fit on this team.
I mean, he could, but
I think they need somebody like that personally, but this coaching staff doesn't agree with me.
You and I would agree on having that more traditional back, but
Ron Rivera
does
not.
It'll be interesting. This is a guy I'll watch. I also think Reyes is going to be a fan favorite. Like, I think we got a couple late guys coming in here who are going to be those. What do we? The cult of Colt kind of guys. That's what these guys are going to be.
Oh yeah, Colt Brennan. Yeah, Reyes will definitely be a fan favorite, but the question is,
can it translate? Yeah.
Can he play the game of football?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
he's a basketball player. For those of you who don't know,
that's the question with Patterson too, though. Can he play at the NFL level at that size?
Well, Reyes, it's can he play football, period. The man has never played a down of football in his life. He's got an amazing story. I mean, his story is that he's from Chile, ended up at Tulane on their basketball team, gave himself a year. He realized he wasn't going to be an NBA player, didn't have the talent. So he gave himself a year to try to make it in football. And he was training in the D.C. area, likes the area. And when Washington called, he canceled all of his other team visits and signed with Washington. But can he play football? Even Reyes doesn't know if he can play football.
No, he doesn't. But, I mean, again, you look at his raw physical talent, he's got all that.
Off the charts. Charts.
He's got all that. So if he can learn to take a hit, learn how to block and some of the fundamentals, it'll be interesting.
Maybe he's the type of guy who needs to end up on the practice squad for a year.
It could be. I mean, doesn't hurt guys like that to get a little time to just sit and learn. So, I don't know. Is there anything else we wanted to cover? Oh, there was one fun story during the draft, and it has something to do with Washington tangentially. And I'm sure you all saw this, that when the Minnesota Vikings drafted quarterback, Kellen Mond, yes. Some reason NFL Network or ESPN, I can't remember who, was interviewing RG3. And RG3 took 2 minutes out of his day just to take cheap shots at Kirk Cousins the entire time, saying, well, the Vikings need to move on because Kirk Cousins is just collecting paychecks and doesn't care and stuff like that. And it, like, I mean, it's funny because you can tell that RG3 is still butthurt about the fact that he lost his starting job because he wasn't good at playing football. So,
I think I only read the quotes. I have not seen the interview. Reading the quotes, I agree with RG3. Now, I think Washington fans think it's funny because everybody hates him, and I understand all that. But here, and I'm embarrassed to say I'm reading Mike Florio's column because Mike Florio's an idiot. But, I mean, he's just quoting the man. So here's what Griffin was quoted by Mike Florio saying. Yeah, I can tell you, quote, I can tell you that number 8 in Minnesota is not real happy right now because Kellen Mond represents exactly what he doesn't do well. Kellen Mond is the big physical quarterback. He can run it, throw it all over the field, and I don't think that's something number 8 is able to do in Cousins in Minnesota. But I think that's what the coaching staff and administration is looking for. As you've seen, Cousins has been collecting checks there in Minnesota for a long time, taking them to 8-8, 7-9, or 9-7 seasons. If he has a bad start to the year like he did last year, I could see the fans and maybe the organization leaning towards Mond if he comes in and impresses. Now, the paychecks, the collecting checks line probably sounded more petty live than it reads, but I don't disagree with any of this quote.
It all sounded petty live. The fact that he kept saying number 8 instead of Kirk, you guys were teammates for 5 years. You know his name. Like, all that stuff.
But the pettiness aside, I think he's right.
I mean, I think he might be right that Kirk Cousins is in the twilight of his time there in Minnesota, yes. But I
mean, he's right. And he's made a lot of money, and he's not taken Minnesota to higher levels than Minnesota was at before he got there. And Kellen Mond does do stuff that Kirk Cousins doesn't do. I don't think Kellen Mond is a long-term successful starting quarterback, but he's a big, strong guy and who runs, and that's exactly what Kirk Cousins doesn't do. So RG3 is actually
right about that.
He may be being petty and evil about it the way he said it, but he's not wrong.
RG3 collected a lot of money doing a lot less than Kirk Cousins. So
I still think that if you put RG3 with the right coach who could have won, put him in his place, told him to shut up and play.
I don't think there's a coach who has the ball, or there are plenty of coaches who would try. I don't think a single coach in the NFL could have gotten through to him.
Well, and they had a sycophantic owner. He would have had, if you put RG3 in the right situation and he had been able to stay healthy, I think he could have been Lamar Jackson-like. But with RG3's mentality and having Daniel Snyder around, and Mike Shanahan played a huge part in screwing him up too, he was never going to succeed. It didn't work out. But in the right situation, I think Robert Griffin could have been a lot better than he was.
I think the injury
worked out pretty well as a backup in Baltimore. He's a perfect backup to Lamar Jackson.
Well, he's a fine backup to Lamar Jackson, but when you watch him play, his passing game has just gotten worse over the years. Like he
hasn't played much. That's why. I'm just saying, if you go back in history, you put him on a better team than Washington with an owner who isn't, like giving him lollipops all the time and
feeding the ego,
and all
that he had.
Yeah, right. His career got ended by all those injuries. If all that stuff had been different,
sure.
It's kind of like saying if I was 6 foot tall and handsome, I could date Cindy Crawford. I realize that, but I'm just saying, in an alternate reality, I think Robert Griffin could have been a good quarterback, could have been a good starting quarterback.
I think a very alternate reality. I think he plays a much bigger part in his own demise than folks realize.
I don't. I really kind of think it was more of a 50-50 thing. I think we're giving this organization way too much credit. This organization, before Ron Rivera, I think there were 4 teams that are the dregs of the NFL. In some order, the Bengals, the Browns, the Lions, and the Redskins. And one of those teams, I don't know who would be the worst out, and the Jets.
And the Jets
so that's
and
5.
the Jaguars.
I don't think the Jaguars are at that level.
I think the Jaguars,
in my view. I don't. So I think those 5 teams were the worst in the NFL. And, Washington's probably bottom 3 out of those teams. Probably. So I don't think anybody was going to succeed here in D.C.
Look, I think that might be fair too, but I also think that Griffin, I don't think he could, with his personality, I don't know if he would have succeeded anywhere.
Well, yeah, he would have had to lose the ego. More importantly, and I think it is weird and creepy that his parents were around the facility and all that, and I'm just saying, if you could have corrected those things, he had the physical tools and the intelligence, football intelligence, to be able to develop into a good starter. That's what I'm saying. He would have. A lot of things would have to go right, and it's stupid to debate him.
But I think the whole point of the reason we see so much quarterback failure is that exact debate. And not just him, but with everybody. And
because the Washington Redskins were an atrociously awful football organization.
Yes.
A total train wreck. Do you guys realize this? This team was a complete train wreck.
Yeah, for a decade.
Complete and total train wreck. Yeah. Rivera seems to have changed course. We'll see, but he's only been here a year. So, every coach, we thought highly Mike Shanahan in the first year too, and he got sucked into the morass of awful that is the Redskins too.
Right.
Every coach seems to be ruined here. So
what I've always said is it's very easy in the first 2 years to be a good coach and have a meritocracy, and this player's not working hard, get rid of him, because those aren't your guys. The hard part is year 5. And we saw this with Jay. We saw this with Mike. We've seen this with a lot of coaches. Gibbs may be the only one who wouldn't have done it, but he left for different reasons. At year 5, it's all your guys. Are you still willing to play meritocracy and saying, this guy's not working out, I got to get rid of him?
Jay Gruden certainly wasn't.
Jay was willing to do it his first and second year, not the last year.
Mike Shanahan certainly wasn't.
Mike Shanahan was terrible about that.
Yeah, he was. So you're right. I think I think you've hit the nail on the head. Yeah, Ron's been great now, but 3 years from now, is it going to be the same? I don't know. And is Dan Snyder going to not? Dan Snyder has a habit of not meddling for the first year because he left Jay alone more or less too for a year. But when there's no Super Bowl trophy in the building after year 2, is Dan still going to be not meddling? And also, Dan's been fighting with his owners and with sexual harassment.
Dan's been hiding.
Lawsuits. Yeah. So when all that's over and he has nothing to do, and the team isn't in the Super Bowl, because I got news for you guys. The schedule this year is brutal with a capital B, and it's not reasonable to think that they're going to have a 10-6 season.
No, it's not.
So, I mean, is Dan going to remain this happy when he's free of all his other distractions and has
if
nothing to do?
If the team's under 500 or like at 9-8 or 8-9,
right?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yes, exactly.
No, and that will be interesting to see because, like, what will Ron be like, or who will be Ron's starting safety? Let's say if this guy they drafted doesn't work out, and he tries to push him in there, whatever,
or for that matter, Ron's starting quarterback. I mean, I guess we didn't bring this up in terms of draft coverage. I know we're kind of out of time, but who's counting really? They didn't draft a quarterback.
No.
You and I disagreed with that in our pre-draft coverage. I thought they shouldn't draft a quarterback unless they were going to get one of the top guys who were like starter quality. And what I think this told me was that Ron is basically happy with his developmental prospects, and he didn't bother bringing in another one. That's what I took from this draft.
I mean, I take that too, because in the second round when they took Cosme, they were sitting there and they could have gotten Mills or Mound or Trask. They could have gotten their pick of those next tier guys, the guys who everyone says, give them 2 years, let them develop, and they might be a starter. And he's like, nope, we're good. We're going to stick with, Allen and Heineke and see if either of them can work out next year.
And Montez.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, by the way, I mean, my goodness, the Texans drafted Davis Mills. They have no choice.
Their quarterback's probably going to be legal issues for the next year.
I think the NFL media has been disgraceful in their coverage of the Deshaun Watson story.
Yeah, they've kind of gone silent, haven't they?
Well, to be perfectly honest, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying it, but I'm saying it anyway. I think ESPN is a very liberal organization, and I think they're caught between competing woke agendas. They're caught between defending the mostly minority females who were clearly, if the allegations are to be taken true, abused by Watson. But Watson is also a black quarterback. And so I think the media is caught between competing interests, and they've defaulted to nothing. That's what I think.
I think that anytime a franchise quarterback does something bad, they try and cover it up. They did it for Ben Roethlisberger too. After
I don't think the media covered up Roethlisberger. I think the NFL covered up Roethlisberger. That's different.
I think the NFL owns
the media covered it. And to be honest, Watson's story is way bigger than Roethlisberger's story.
Yeah.
Way bigger. I think if this had been somebody else, not Deshaun Watson, this would be nonstop coverage.
Quite possibly. Well, but regardless, I think in the end he's not going to be playing this year. So they made a smart move.
He's going to be suspended either with pay or without pay. One of the two.
They made a smart move drafting
the idea that he can, in the next 4 months, is it, May? So 3 months, can settle all these lawsuits and assure the NFL he did absolutely nothing wrong in the next 3 months. The chances of that are slim. And Slim's just hit a Greyhound bus out of town.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. Well, I don't know if you have anything else for the draft.
No, I think I've already gotten myself in enough trouble.
Guys, hope you enjoyed the draft. We are going to start our roster previews next week, and we will see you then. Oh, what's up?
Actually, let me get I think we have to miss a week. We've timed our roster previews, our position group breakdowns to hit the beginning of training camp. And so I think next week, our position group breakdowns are going to start on the week of the 10th of May.
Yeah.
Is that next week?
That's next week. Today is the 2nd.
No, I mean that as the 15th. No, I don't mean that. No, next week we will not. The position group breakdowns will start on 2 shows.
Okay,
from
so
now.
next week we're going to talk about some
what I'm
made-up
talking
stuff. That's the
Yes.
plan.
Maybe we'll come up with a guest
Yeah,
or something
we'll have to figure
to
it
talk
out.
about the draft. Yeah.
All right, guys, we will see you next week, though. We'll figure out what we're going to talk about between now and then. Bye.